Mouthwashing was one of those games that I always saw but never played. The thing is, after giving it a shot, I finally understand. Mouthwashing is one of the most unique, depressing games I have ever experienced, and it will stick with me forever. Not just because of its body horror, but because it strips away humanity, forcing the player to look at the ugly parts of human nature. At its core, mouthwashing is an experiment. It asks a simple question: what happens to an isolated group of people when you push them past their limit? The game takes place in deep space on board the Tolpar, a freighter ship owned by the Pony Express company. You and your crew are tasked with a massive delivery haul that takes 382 days. Walking through the hallways, the Tolpar doesn't look like a sleek, futuristic spaceship like you'd see in other games. Instead, it feels small, cheap, and cramped. There are no grand windows looking at the stars, just raw metal pipes and heavy doors, all tightly packed to make as much room as possible for the cargo. The only real comfort the crew has is a giant screen that projects a fake sunset. It's a sad corporate knockoff, but still a daily reminder of the real world they left behind. This cramped atmosphere looks even better thanks to the game's low-poly PS1 style graphics. When I first saw the game, I thought the retro look was just a gimmick, especially since so many indie games during the time was using that style. But after playing it, I realized those blocky textures serve a much more darker purpose. The low-poly look strips away any sense of warmth. The corporate posters look faceless. The machinery looks jagged and dangerous. The art style makes the entire environment feel completely dead and uncared for. And really, you can blame all of this on one thing: corporate greed. Pony Express is entirely responsible for everything that happens on the ship. This is a company obsessed with cutting costs. In the universe of mouthwashing, almost every other shipping company has upgraded to automated, unmanned drone fleets. Human crews are a thing of the past, but Pony Express kept human workers around for one sick reason: human labor was the cheapest option. It was much cheaper for them to trap 5 real people in a metal box for a year than it was to get an upgrade. To save even more money on the payroll, they hired as few people as they could and didn't bother with background checks. The ship's only medical officer is completely unqualified, and the newest member is just an unpaid intern. It's a deeply uncomfortable feeling when you realize that the only person competent in this entire ship is the mechanic, and he's a raging alcoholic. This setup always felt oddly realistic. It's the type of thing you'd see a company doing today. But when people are desperate for money, the workplace environment does not matter. Neither does the commute or the shitty co-workers. If a job puts food on a table, you take it, no matter how bad it hurts. Pony Express took advantage of that desperation. They don't care about mental health or teamwork as long as the cheap labor is there. And the sickest thing about it, for months, the crew risks their lives thinking they're hauling valuable supplies. But when they finally break into the vault after the crash, they find out the truth. The secret cargo is mouthwash. In a sense, it's a metaphor for the company itself. Mouthwash is a superficial product. It doesn't fix your teeth. It just masks the bad breath to give you an illusion of cleanliness. That, at its core, is what Pony Express does. They plaster fake suns on the walls and hand out employee handbooks to hide the fact that their company is rotting, both economically and ethically. But don't worry, that's not the worst part. The biggest turning point of the game is when the ship crashes. This is the exact moment everything takes a turn for the worse. Behind the scenes, Pony Express was going bankrupt, and instead of being honest, management ordered the captain to keep the upcoming mass layoffs a secret. They wanted to make sure that the crew finished their 1-year shift before throwing them out on the street with nothing to compensate them. To make it worse, the captain was the only one with a guaranteed future after the layoffs. This corporate order is the spark that sets everything off. It completely enrages the co-captain, who is already unstable, deeply insecure, and facing troubles for assaulting the ship's nurse. He realizes that his life is completely over the second they get back on Earth. In a desperate, selfish attempt to run away from responsibility and ruin the captain's reputation, the co-captain locks himself in the cockpit, intentionally causing the ship to crash. And that is where the true horror of the game sets in. It's the sudden realization that the real danger isn't the cosmic monster. The danger is sitting right next to you, and when he snaps, there'll be nowhere left to run. It leaves you with a sickening feeling. Pony Express didn't intentionally cause the crash, but by creating a selfish environment predicated on greed, it allowed people's worst version to manifest. But a broken system is only half the story. The real horror of Mouthwashing is what the environment does to this deeply human crew trapped inside of it. When you first meet the crew of Topar, they don't feel like the standard disposable horror victims. They're witty, they have charm, and they're relatable. They feel like a real group of coworkers you'd find at any everyday job. You have Curly, the dependable captain responsible for the crew. There's also Swansea, the grumpy mechanic who's been in the industry for years. Daisuke is the new enthusiastic intern who's honestly just happy to be there. And then you have Anya, the anxious nurse who tries her best and genuinely wants to look out for everyone. Jimmy is also a part of this crew, acting as the co-captain of the ship. They all have their own unique aspirations, goals, and reasons for taking this awful job. They aren't saints by any means, but they are human, and that's exactly what makes watching their downfall so devastating. As the isolation sets in and resources run dry after the crash, the situation slowly but surely strips away their quirks and coping mechanisms. The bleakness of the reality pushes these human characters to their absolute limit, and their reactions to the situation are painfully realistic. They don't handle the trauma like movie stars. They break down. They make selfish, illogical choices out of sheer desperation. To truly understand the tragedy of Mouthwashing, we have to look at how the events completely shattered each individual crew member. We start with Captain Curly. Before the crash, he was the golden boy. He's friendly, reliable, and deeply trusted by everybody on board. But his biggest flaw is that he wants to be liked by everyone and hates confrontation. When the ship's nurse confides in him that she was assaulted by Jimmy, Curly completely fails her. Instead of stepping up and enforcing real punishment, he tries to protect his friend. He diminishes the crime, all to avoid confronting the reality. Even when he tries to do the right thing, it ends up firing back at him. When corporate tells him about the secret layoff notice, he chooses to disobey the order and tell the crew the truth. But his honesty ends up cracking the foundation of the ship, sending the already unstable co-captain Jimmy into a total panic. When Jimmy locks himself into the cockpit to crash the ship, Curly is the only one who's able to intervene, but as a result, he becomes horribly mutated. Not by the asteroid itself, but from the automatic foam system the ship deployed. Just thinking about how painful it must have been to have that sticky foam rip off your skin makes me disgusted. Post-crash, his physical state becomes a metaphor for his failed leadership. He's left entirely paralyzed and horribly disfigured, forced to watch the slow, agonizing destruction of his entire crew, all while being pumped full of painkillers. He wanted to carry the weight of the ship by making everyone happy, but in the end, he couldn't even save anyone. Then there is Anya. Anya is the perfect example of what happens when fear and isolation completely breaks a person. Even before the crash, she was always on edge and terrified that she wasn't qualified to be the ship's nurse. But the real horror of Anya's story is how the rest of the crew completely fails her. After she is assaulted by Jimmy, she's left entirely alone. When she tries to talk about what happened, she's met with pure silence. The captain tries to sweep it under the rug just to keep the peace, and Anya is left no choice but to suck it up, even when she realizes that she's become pregnant from the assault. Post-crash, Anya locks herself inside the medical bay. She's completely consumed by the pain and the suffocating environment of the ship. With no help and no one to turn to, solace was the only answer, and she eventually takes her own life. Instead of having a team to rely on, she was taken advantage of. Watching her story unfold was heartbreaking. It goes to show that it wasn't just the player feeling the heavy, claustrophobic nature of the game. The characters were trapped in it too. Perhaps the most painful character to watch decay is Daisuke. Daisuke is the ultimate corporate victim. He is the unpaid intern. He represents the pure youth and optimism. He doesn't even fully understand how serious a year-long journey into deep space actually is. He's just excited to learn, to prove himself, and to find a place where he belongs under Swansea's mentorship. When the ship crashes, Daisuke tries his hardest to step up and act like a true crew member. He volunteers to crawl into the ship's maintenance vents to save Anya, but he was never trained and he was never qualified. His lack of experience catches up to him in a split second, causing an accident that leaves him brutally mangled by the very machines that he was supposed to fix. Daisuke's fate shows the absolute cruelty of Pony Express. They happily took the free labor from an enthusiastic kid, only to leave him with no future. Daisuke's death is what directly triggers Swansea's collapse. Swansea is a great character because on the surface, he seems like a loud, mean, raging alcoholic, but underneath that facade is the only person who actually understands how the world works. He knows how companies operate, and because of that, he forms a protective, fatherly bond with Daisuke. He uses his rough maintenance lessons as a way to shield the kid from how cruel life can really be. But when Daisuke is left completely mangled, Swansea shatters. The pressure breaks him. With the medical supplies completely gone and zero hope of a rescue team coming, Swansea falls back on his old tendencies. In one of the most painful scenes in the entire game, Swansea is forced to put a tragic end to Daisuke's suffering himself, spending the entire journey trying to look out for the kid and keep him alive, only to become his executioner. And finally, that brings us back to the co-captain. Jimmy is a deeply insecure, arrogant man who spent his entire life living in Curly's shadow. He had the technical skills and the qualifications to be a captain. He even scored higher than Curly in the exam, but he lacked the actual empathy and emotional maturity required to lead people. We all know it was Jimmy who caused the crash, but it's what he does after the crash that transforms him from an entitled man to a total monster. Jimmy takes advantage of Curly's silence, blaming him for the crash so he can play the heroic hero. He constantly manipulates the survivors, always trying to justify his vile actions, gaslights Anya, and eventually resorts to cannibalism. None of this excuses what he did. Jimmy is entirely responsible for his own malice, but his downfall shows how a toxic, desperate environment acts like a magnifying glass for a broken person. It just exposed one that was hiding inside of him already. Mouthwashing doesn't give you a heroic story where people rise up above the tragedy. It shows you exactly what happens when you push regular people past their breaking point. Watching characters you've grown to understand completely lose their minds makes you realize just how fragile human beings really are. In the end, no one wins. Jimmy eventually dies along with the rest of the crew, and Curly is left trapped, forever sealed in the cryopod, in pain and in agony, till the ship's eventual destruction. But even though they failed, they tried. And that's exactly why this game sticks with you long after the credits roll. The true horror is that even in our best efforts, the worst can still happen, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Trying is inherently human, to look past the bad and hope for the good, even when it seems so far away. Because when we choose the good by believing in people, our worst moments don't make us monsters. The only question I have left is, if you were trapped in that exact situation, stripped of your food, your future, and your safety, would you do the same?